All right. It is Wednesday, December 4th. Oh my goodness, it's already December. What happened? I thought it was February last week. This is going too fast. We have a great show today. We're going to talk about all kinds of cool things around innovation of transportation, infrastructure, and many other things. I'll do a bit of a recap of what's been going on, but the feel in the ground is that 2025 is going to be a fabulous new year, a lot of optimism. And Anyway, many things to share. We have a great guest. Before we get rolling, though, on this glorious Wednesday, December 4th, on the pre-Christmas holidays and all that, we have our own John Sibley Butler to play some music.
I'm falling in love again. Never thought I would again. Never thought I would. And I may be making mistakes again. But if I lose a win, how would I know? How would I know? How would I know? I will. I know.
All right, Johnny. Thank you very
Nicely
much.
done, John.
You're welcome. How
So,
you doing today?
so Johnny, lots going on. There's so much going on. So the Port of San Antonio, just to start us out, was named by the International Association of Research Parks the most outstanding innovation district. So you probably know that the Port of San Antonio has all kinds of things going on around, sort of the research park of the future, smart city of the future, all combined, right? It's not a real seaport. It's a land-based port, but it's really a research park. It's an interesting project. Boeing is sort of the anchor tenant of that, and they're spending roughly $500 million building some amazing things. And I'm sure that Dan is aware of what's going on there. I love the guy. I love Jim uh, Persback, and what he's doing. And again, it's just he's pushing the envelope on microgrids, on power, on water, on all kinds of things, sustainability. So it's going to become a jewel showcase that will add to the success of Texas. Anyway, so Johnny, I know that we're talking a lot about all kinds of projects. I don't know if you want to give a snippet of all the things that you're in the middle of and sort of driving from the grid on down, but I feel like the energy level of 2025 is going to be gigantic. What say you?
Well, I think so. I'd be happy to do that. I got another article accepted. You know, the old professor still published it, and I also got another grant approved by UT. I'm emeritus, but I still do grants and lots of publications. But let's talk about the stuff that we're doing. First of all, I've been in the Miller for the last 10 years with Richard Schrindel and you about providing new guidelines for the grid in terms of controls. So basically now the grid is being controlled by a Model T kind of controls. It's like me, as I like to say on the show, it's like me trying to drive my sports car, right, with the controls of your sports car, right. So we're working on that. It's very difficult because the problem is nobody understands that there's a problem, and the big problem is we can run out of electricity. In the state of Texas, we've done a great job of bringing companies here, but the question is, what will the electricity landscape look like in the future. So that's one thing. And the other thing we're working on is housing after the great disasters. There's a new technology from California. It's being done throughout South America, and it's a process of, of building the house such that when the storm leaves, you just sweep the house out again. That is, you don't have to worry about the house blowing away. And being from the great state of Louisiana, I know about that. I was spoken with Honore, the General Honore, who did it, who's a big consulting. So that's a wonderful thing. And the other thing, of course, is if you look at what's happening in Washington D.C., they want to bring entrepreneurs to the table in Washington D.C. And I have spoken to lots of people in the president administrator of the upcoming the president elect, and I have one, two, three friends who will be cabinet members of that administration. With an emphasis on entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship, and those kinds of things. So I think once we get through the hurt of the elections, different people get through the hurt of the elections, we got to turn to look at the general process of what's going on in America. I've always read a lot of economics. I think that a lot of the theories that we have are a little different because I start with earth, I start with energy rather than labor. Most people start with labor, and I like to start with energy. And the other thing I've been really, really involved in is CNBC selection for the disruptive technologies. So in the midst of everything that's happening in America, in the midst of the CEO of United Healthcare getting gunned down in New York City in broad daylight, which is not, of course, a good thing. In the midst of it all, and the world has gone absolutely crazy. The NCAA football has gone absolutely crazy. The NIL kids are switching teams. And so, Andrea, I'm very busy, and we talk almost every day about the projects that we have. But the most exciting one is how do we get people to understand as the grid grows, we need to have new controls. And on this program from the very, very beginning, I've said the grid today is where computers were, right, 60 years ago.
Yep.
Everybody was doing their own thing on their own platform, no standardization. So we need to get everybody on the same kind of platform moving forward so that we can actually control and share electricity as we go through the years. It's been very, very good. These are wicked problems, but I've solved wicked problems all my life, from the changing of Austin, Texas, and being a combat soldier in Vietnam. That was one of the most wicked problems of all. So anyway, it's been interesting, but I love challenging and working with Lou Ellen and you guys, people with great ideas. And Lou Ellen has seen the past much farther than I can go back, and he can tell you what happened in the past and then relate it to the future. So his columns do that. So right now I'm beating up on myself because I'm being nice to him. I'm saying good things about him. But I will pray over that tonight and ask God to forgive me for saying great things about him. But other than that, what I'm doing what I'm doing is very, very interesting, and I really, really enjoy it.
Thank you,
Um,
Johnny. Llewellyn, you're on deck. What's going on? What's your predicament for 2025? Innovation, transformation. What's happening?
so when the incoming president, in fact, puts huge tariffs on our best trading partners, if he does, our economy is going to be shuttered. It's going to be in terrible shape. And we don't know if this is a power play, if it's real. I'm a little disturbed by the cabinet, and they may be Johnny's friends, but they're ill-suited mostly to the jobs that they're going into. Some of them seem to have been rather ill-suited in other departments of their lives. The stories keep coming out. However, I'm concentrating right at the moment on two things. One is constant motion. I'm working with a company called DD Motion out of Baltimore, Maryland, which seeks to take variable inputs in electricity, for example, wind turbines, and to produce a constant output. They plan with a wind turbine to get rid of the gearbox, get rid of the inverter, and to have a constant output so that you retain inertia, a rotational inertia, which is very important to the grid. In Germany, there's a great problem because they have so much wind that they have to create. They lose the inertia in the inverter, so they have to create with power electronics synthetic inertia. Inertia keeps the cycles at 60 cycles a second, which is what our electricity systems run on. It's in Germany is 50 cycles per second. But if you lose that, you black out. You've got to keep those cycles up. And one of the things we know is if enough plant goes down, it is very difficult to bring it back up and to synchronize all of this. So that's very interesting. It's a bit arcane, but it's very essential and interesting. The other thing that in electricity that commands my time is virtual power plants. I'm doing a big broadcast on Wednesday next. Everybody's welcome to tune in. Just go to the United States Energy Association website, which is usea.org, and look it up. We have 8 of the world's top experts from this country and from Europe on distributed energy resources. The big news is out of Texas when NRJ and Home Renew have come, which is a Google company, have come to an agreement that they believe will produce a virtual power plant of 1 gigawatt, which is a lot of power to add to a system. It looks like DER is the low-hanging fruit. That's distributed energy resources. It's the low-hanging fruit. Its efficiency writ large. It's using underused plant and smart meters to reduce demand in critical hours. I find that very exciting. It's something that can be done now. All sorts of utilities are trying it. My friends down at Rayburn Electric, just outside of Dallas, they believe they can get 10% more production out of their system, and eventually with a virtual power plant, essentially dispatchable power. But 10% is a lot. If we did it across the nation, we would have a lot of additional power, and that really does look like the first thing we can do, because demand for electricity is surging. When it comes to some of the new things like demands, like small modular reactors, there are lots of question marks over those. We've got to decide which technology. We've got a light water technology, which is NuScale. We've got the wave technology out there in Wyoming in the Bill Gates plant at TerraPower, and we have GE Hitachi, which is being explored both in Canada and at the Tennessee Valley Authority. We can't have all of them. It doesn't work like that. We have to standardize on something. And meanwhile, fusion is coming on quite amazingly fast. Nobody knows whether it really will work, but there's a lot of private and venture money in fusion, and next year will be a telling year at Commonwealth Fusion Systems, where they believe they will crack the fusion nut and be ready to start manufacturing their first devices. They don't like to call them reactors. I call them reactors, but they would like to put on the market, probably sold directly to the data centers, not to the utilities, a plant of 400 megawatts ready to go, turnkey. If that is so, it's a huge breakthrough. Meanwhile, there's a sort of a backlash against small modular reactors. Lots of people, old-timers in the nuclear industry, are saying, what's wrong with a 1,000 megawatt reactor? Why don't we build more like the Vogtle 3 and 4, which are 1,000 megawatt Westinghouse reactors? The first of them was built at greater cost overrun and disjointed supply chains. The second, which is Vogtle 4, the costs came down and it looked pretty competitive. Now, the Southern Company, which owns Georgia Power, which built Vogel 3 and 4 is very happy to have that electricity. They're looking at huge surge in demand on the Southern Company system. So electricity is a very interesting thing at the moment.
Oh, well said, Llewellyn. Well said. Well, let me dive into our guest, Dan Corey. It's with us today. He's the National Director of Mobility Technologies. Things like, if you're a geek, ITS, AVCV, at STV, which is a great company.
Yeah.
As our guest here for the hour, STV offers professional services in transportation systems, building design, water systems, and other essential infrastructure, among many, many, many other things.
Yeah.
STV works with public and private sector clients to make all these things happen. And obviously, they're all about building the future. Dan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andres. And John, a great way to start off with your melody there. Appreciate that. Also appreciate you acknowledging the horrific event that happened in New York City this morning. Thoughts and prayers are out to the family there and to the company. Andres, again, thank you so much for having me on. Really love even our pre-conversation going into the podcast here as we started diving into SMRs that Llewellyn so eloquently talked about a little while ago. Let me talk a little bit about STV. So we're about a 3,400 person company nationwide here in the States. Do a lot of work in Texas around we'll call it the U of the company, the coast, the southern border, and up to the eastern seaboard. Our group, and I've had a very fortunate career. I think a little bit junior to most of you there. I'm about 30 years in. I don't have the gray hair, but the gray hairs have come in, and it's on the beard as well. We had the fortunate opportunity to build a new team from scratch here at STV, our mobility technologies team, and I was tapped to lead that. And the thing that I brought I want to bring this group to market is let's bring in folks from both the state agencies as well as the public side, and let's really start solving ecosystem problems. A lot of consultant firms, a lot of other agencies are very parochial. We were just talking about energy consumption. If you start looking at the transportation field, whether it's electric vehicles, whether we're using hydrogen, whether we're doing the data centers, where are we creating that power? How is that going to support those types of things? We talk about eVTOLs, and you start looking at advanced air mobility as that next form of transportation. How do we look at that? In the state of Texas, in the country, how does that tie into our existing transportation system? And for us, it's really looking at a few key areas. So it's how autonomy plays into supplement. It's how we see data and data exchanges. We're working with the federal government right now on roadway digital infrastructure. So how do we start taking all the data that each state has and really looking at it in a national perspective? If you're going on I-35 from border to border, how are we making sure that trucks and freight logistics are moving efficiently, that we know what's being moved, where it's being moved, and how we could divert it if in case there's an emergency? So for us, it's looking at that entire ecosystem as we plan, design, and construct those solutions in a variety of different areas that we could talk about. One of the things I do like to add is we always see that the work that we all do is local. And I think having local insights to help solve those problems are really tied into how we bring integrity and partnership and optimism into things that we do. So real high level, we can get into a lot more specifics. I look forward to the next 40 minutes with you all. I got a lot of good questions. I know we talked about the existing administration and the new administration. And I think, for us on the consultant side of life, there was a lot of funding put out over the last few years on BIL. I think it's now time to see where the rubber meets the road. I think for us, let's make sure that those projects have and are being constructed, are being serving the needs of the general population as we, we bring a lot more services and safety and mobility, specifically the things that we do, to the public. But no, thanks
Yeah,
for having me on.
Dan, before we get rolling here, let me try to set the stage a little even deeper and let you give the freedom and the guys to chime in. You know, we at CMG are involved in many things. We are working with Neon and the Cube and the Line and several smart city projects across multiple states and this whole vertical takeoff and landing thing and our work with TxDOT and also all the grid work and you know one of the interesting things to me is that I see the electric vehicle paradigm as an interesting catalyst because it's forcing transportation and the grid and power to come together. And yet I only see, you know, high level Tesla succeeding and a lot the rest of the industry sort of, you know, trying to keep up, but really not, you know, not doing a good job of it. And then the current administration had to issue an interesting, you know, push to build 500,000 EV stations, of which only a few have been built, maybe 10 at this point. Last time I heard Buttigieg talk about it. And, you know, interesting, why is it taking so long? But, you know, it's $7.5 billion sitting there to build an interesting new nexus of infrastructure. I wonder what's your take on what do you guys see? What is the catalyst? What is pushing things? Is it the data centers? Is it the EVs? Is it the, you know, the SMRs? Where do you guys see the sort of the shifting of the paradigm as we move into the 21st century?
No, a great question. But go ahead, John. Go ahead. You go first.
Go ahead. You're the man. You're the man.
No, go ahead. I'll defer to you, and I'll jump in.
Well, let me just say, let me see if I can frame it. You know, when I was at Northwestern University in graduate school, one of the greatest universities in the world, except LSU Baton Rouge, of course, I had a great course called Technology and Society, taught by Everett Hughes from the University of Chicago, Mark Janowitz from the University of Chicago. And as Andreas just said, what's pushing all of this? Now, Technology and Society, which was a combined organization, science, and sociology course, asked this kind of question, just as Andreas just asked the question. We know that all of this is happening, okay? Not only who's pushing it, but what's the impact on the gross national product? What's the impact on families? What's the impact on how we move? What's the impact on how and we organize in the future? And when you take that course, which was from the ancient Assyrians all the way up to the present at that time, we can look at the impact of airplanes. What did airplanes do for us? Who was pushing airplanes? What did airplanes do? What did the refrigerator do to us? What did television do to us? So what Andre is saying, I think, in a broader sense, is first of all, what is the catalyst for what we do? Is it economic new jobs? Are we doing it just for technology's sake? But we would think that we're doing it because it's going to have a great impact on our future. So I would say to Andreas is this. What's happening now is a revolution in mobility, which has always had unintended consequences, from how people rob banks to where people live, from how people fly from coast to coast. One of the greatest things that two things I can't perceive, television and jets. I get on that airplane in Tokyo and wake up and I'm in Dallas. So I think Andre is good. And the question is not only what's pushing it, but what do you perceive as the good consequences and the bad consequences?
No, and those are great questions. It's funny. Last night I was just teaching a class on technology at Drexel University to a bunch of juniors and seniors, and we go through that paradigm. It's great that you brought it up, John. So I'm smiling. So I'm thinking back to some of their answers, and when I asked them, I said, where do you see the future? And this was on the transportation side first. I said, where do you see it in the next 15 years? And I showed them the video. I don't know if you all have seen this. Walt Disney in the 50s showed his
Mhm.
what's the transportation of the future. I'm sure you're all aware of it. And I showed that to the students. I said, this is, you're 70 years later, and some of the stuff was developed, well, not developed, but has really come to fruition, in the last 5 to 10 years. Where do you see it? And I think for them, transportation is different in this generation. So I think it's a combination of things, John. I think there's partially an economic driver for me and for us. You don't put out technology for technology's sake. What's the need? What's the benefit? And I think GDP is a great one. Jobs obviously is big. I think shrinking the world to connect is important, but at what cost? You talk to the students now, and what's funny, especially in the urban settings, driving is not a big deal. I mean, think about you all, did you get your license and you wanted that freedom, and now it's, no, I don't need to. I've got different ways of transporting myself back and forth. So that's different. And that paradigm shift of the younger generation is how does that really impact what we're doing now? I think traditional ways of moving goods and people is changed. So I think for them, it's convenience. I don't think, look, I always think safety. Safety is always a big part of what we're looking to. How can we get, you brought the jet in, John, think of all the testing that went on prior, I'm a pilot myself. So, Wright brothers, and Kitty Hawk to, seeing what, we've seen for hypersonic, travel, or hypersonic uses of weaponizing. I think as we move forward, it's, I'm trying to frame how the students said this. They couldn't even think about what's coming next. I think that, for them, it's everything. The paradigm is you have everything almost that you want right now. What else? You have access to data, you have access to information, you have access to anything. At what point do we say, all right, how are we helping society? Because I don't know, where's that next move is. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And and let me give an example here. You are a pilot, but you guide your airplane. You don't fly your airplane. Llewellyn is a pilot, and he had to fly his airplane. So I'm amazed that when I look at the helicopters now, they're like games. Whereas, and I was a medic on a Huey, they flew the Hueys in Vietnam. So just in a matter of so many years between where Llewellyn was, where you actually flew the plane, and you just fly it like a game, because the plane does everything itself. So I think so, but I think I would also ask, is economics pushing this? Is it just the fact that kids like to do things? What's pushing it, you think?
I think there is an economics factor to it. Again, if you look at some of the administration dollars that have gone out, yes, that is a Jobs Creation Act, with how we're moving forward. I think for me personally, we need to provide more manufacturing locally. I think that's a key part of this as well. So whether it's batteries, whether it's SMRs, as Llewellyn was talking about, whether it's microgrids, I think that resiliency is a key part, and manufacturing is a key part to be quite honest with you, John. I think that's where I see us moving forward. And transportation is a small microcosm of all of that. I'm curious with Llewellyn.
We talk constantly about change, but we don't expect it. We expect continuation. And we say change and we mean continuation. But there's a limit to continuation. For 150 years or so, we have been moving bodies with greater and greater skill, greater velocity, greater reach. 200 years ago, you likely did not go very far from where you were born unless you were very rich. Today, everybody expects to go to Europe, go to South America, to have some travel. This is taken for granted. When I go to Europe, I look around how different the passenger list is today from what the passenger list was 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when it was fewer people were traveling and more of them were doing it on business, but it was much more of an adventure, and people hadn't taken it as a right as we now do. I would like to just point out for people who think that electric vehicles, because it's been some delay in the rate of adoption in the general public of the individual automobile, that is not reflective of what is actually happening. By 2030, half of the fleets of commercial delivery vehicles intracity, will be electric. That includes the post office, Amazon, all those prime vans will be electric. The post office wagons will be electric. This is a huge move forward, and it will impact every aspect of society, both usually constructively, at least the air quality will be better, but the demand at particular times of day to refuel those vehicles, i.e. to plug them in, they are potentially a resource because they can be used as a battery, as a giant battery. And when you do that to say all of the post office, all of prime delivery, or all of a school bus fleet, you've got a very large storage system. But it has to be recharged, and you have to have an optimum time of day to recharge it. And the recharging has to be done fairly fast. I would assume from around about 11 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning when they go on the road again. So there are huge changes taking place, and you cannot look to the future without, and there are no answers yet, but without realizing that AI is here and it is going to affect everything. It's going to affect medicine, it's going to affect the workplace, it's going to affect the change in the information structure. It is going to have its own problems, but it also is going to be a huge boost to productivity. So many things are going to be different, and it's no good saying, oh, it's a time of change, it's going to be the same but faster. No, it's not going to be the same but faster, it's going to be different. And those who will prosper particularly will be those who guess right about the future. This expectation that we all should always be moving, that we all should, that may come to an end. We're already seeing, you've said it yourself, Dan, when you said students, I think at Drexel, are less interested in their personal automobile than they were. The biggest change I've seen in transportation has not been something big and grand. It's been the humble electric scooter, which have people moving around, and electrified bicycles. Nobody saw that. We do need a huge technological breakthrough on transport. And I was interested in Elon Musk's boring machine. It hasn't caught on. We haven't bored many holes with it, but it does suggest a dimension making transportation under the ground cheap and easy, and deserves revisiting. But we've seen city transportation, New York City, Washington, where you have subways, Boston, that there's been a considerable falling off in traffic because people are working from home. The commuters are not commuting with the density that they once did. And this changes the amount of pressure on transportation and the time of day pressure. So change is happening. The lucky people will get it right, and the unlucky ones will get it wrong.
Dan, what projects are you working on? Share.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So again, I think I'll go back to what I said in my intro with roadway digital infrastructure and seeing that amount of data. And we talked, Llewellyn had a great comment there about the amount of information and data that we have and how we're sharing it. I mean, for us, I think being able to connect the country, and I'll use freight as a great example. I'm a freight person at heart, and how you're moving freight from one side of the country to the other. And it could be inner cities. So let's start from a metropolis of New York, a Dallas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago. How do we use the infrastructure? So let's think about the Amazon deliveries. Let's think about buses that are being used. I think for us, it's let's see what we have existing today and how we get the most efficiency out of it. I love the idea of using buses as also carriers for Amazon. I'll be quite honest with y'all. You know what? You've got a lot of storage space underneath. And if you're stopping every, inner city, you're stopping every 3, 4, 5 blocks, there's a great drop off right there. Let's reduce the amount of vehicles and have, corner pickups, or have people on bikes ready to go and grab that package out. So as you start thinking about the freight system, that last mile really ends, and we could utilize things better there. I think for us, it's also is now, you talk to truck drivers, around the country, and for them, they don't know where to park, how to park. We have 200,000 shortages of jobs, and because everyone wants that Amazon package, today, yesterday, or as it is. I joked with the students last night. I said, who's mad when they get an email, text from Amazon and says, sorry, we're going to be delayed a day? Well, hey, there was a wreck in Michigan the other night because of snow. How do we avoid that? How do we, reroute? And I think being able for the states to be able to share data. Now I'm thinking quarter wise, and I really appreciate the work that FHWA is doing on this. It's looking at it holistically now. And I think that's one of the biggest plays. And for us, it's sharing data exchanges. We talked about airports before, and a lot of work that we have done with DFW and other airports throughout the country. How do you bring passengers in safely and more efficiently? Data on that specifically is, look, gosh, how many times I fly into DFW and there's bad weather, but I seem to be the person that brings it. You have that delay. How do you now change how TNCs are coming in? How do you change that pattern dynamically? So for us, I think, again, looking at that whole ecosystem as a whole, how do you prepare for it? Llewellyn, so that those are two key things: freight, and then how we're doing access around different airports for us. We're also doing a lot of work with TxDOT right now with a connected vehicle and sharing of data as data is coming from the vehicles connected to anything to the intersection, and sharing that out. Houston, great job that they're doing with collecting that data and sharing it between not only vehicles but to their traffic management centers. And I think finally, some of the fun things that we're working on is it really does come to is freight movement. I'll be honest with you, we've been doing a lot of good work with freight movement throughout the country and working with the different states. So how do we optimize that? And I think sitting down with the Amazons, long haul truckers, and also bringing hydrogen into the trucks, I think is the next thing. Batteries on trucks, we all know, way too heavy, not efficient. And I would love to hear, Llewellyn, your take on this. Is we talked about whether it's fusion that was coming on. How do we see that movement of heavier vehicles and the type of propulsion systems? Again, you're looking to say 50% of all the vehicles in 2030 are going to be electrified. I see it as other propulsion systems, and I think that's going to be key for us to start building out some of these hydrogen locations.
I think that's very interesting. It is the one place where hydrogen might actually be more effective. I think hydrogen is oversold as a fuel. Remember, it has far less energy density than natural gas. It has a NOx problem when you combust it, and it's got a high burn rate, which means it's explosive. Also, you don't have it in any abundance. You have to make it, so it becomes a byproduct maybe of a windmill or of some other, maybe if you get enough surplus of nuclear power. But right at the moment, unless somebody steps up and starts ordering some nuclear plants, that is a pipe dream. There's nobody with an order book. There are a lot of people with ideas. But I like the idea of looking at freight and how we're going to move it. And my suggestion is probably that we're not totally thought out on this. One is, I go back to Elon Musk and the boring. I think it is not suitable for moving people, but ideal for moving freight. Why not move freight underground? Why does freight have to go on the surface and people go underground? That doesn't make any sense. It makes a lot more sense to put freight underground and people on the surface. So I think there's a future there. When it comes to those large trucks, I think it'll be done by battery, but I think we will have a system of en route charging so that you don't actually, a truck, say, going down 95, basically from Canada to Key West, would have sections of that roadway that would where it could pick up a charge. It particularly works for your buses because buses stop at bus stops, and the Koreans, I've not checked on it lately, were experimenting with having recharging at the bus stop so that the bus smoothly recharges. But I think a light battery, and I'm not sure what kind, it need not necessarily be lithium. There are other light batteries in prospect. They haven't arrived yet, but they're in prospect. But a rechargeable light battery. But meanwhile, intercity truck transportation looks as though it will remain with smelly diesel for quite a long time. It is the last bit of the transportation nut that has not been cracked by electricity. Back in 1974, I worked on a study for President Nixon on the future, and we said electrify everything, electrify the railroads. Well, I just looked up. There are a few electrified railroads. There's a famous corridor from Washington to Boston. There's about 600 miles out in the Midwest somewhere. And there are a lot of commuter railroads around Boston, New York, etc., Philadelphia, that are electrified. But by and large, we never did it, and maybe we never will do it. But I think that electrification has a lot of appeal, and maybe we'll electrify buses in ways we haven't thought of. But for my thinking is, it might be easier. I've been looking at hydrogen fairly closely for more than 50 years. And the closer you get to it, the less convinced by it you are. Now,
Well, I would say that, you know, hydrogen eventually makes sense that it will make it just because of the abundance of it. And, you know, the challenges of it has always been the volatility of the element. But you know, the 2024 Toyota Mirai, the SRP is $50,000. It is, you can buy it right now. It's 100% hydrogen. It's for sale. It's for real. It's delivered to you by Toyota. It's coming. It's coming in many ways, right? And eventually, there are several companies doing trucks with hydrogen. And that's the thing about it that I was trying to see if I can get more insights from you, Dan, that the EV is sort of the beginning of a transformation on how mobility and energy and living and transportation and technology are all blending, right? All the Tesla cars are sort of like an iPhone. They're really software driven. They're not cars. They're, you know, they're programmable vehicles, you know. What do you see changing, let's say, on the infrastructure side? Am I going to be able to program the roads so that when I'm evacuating, all the traffic signals go up north instead of back and forth? Or if I want to switch and drive on the left side or on the right side of the road? What do you see happening in infrastructure when it comes to bringing compute, telecommunications, software to it?
Yeah, no, and I think that that all ties into a multitude of things. I think it ties into the autonomy you're talking about with Tesla and or other vehicles. I mean, go back to the conversation we are having that, you know, the students don't want to drive their own vehicles. So now if all of a sudden you have more of a proliferation of AVs throughout the country, and that could be you know, passenger vehicles, it could be buses, it could be your own, you know, your own personal vehicle. Now you have a way of actually controlling traffic, Andres, that, you know, we didn't have before. You know, we talk about traffic smoothing and traffic calming. How interesting would it be if all of a sudden Llewellyn is in an autonomous vehicle traveling on the highway, and all of a sudden everyone knows that there is an issue, that all of a sudden a signal goes to the autonomous vehicle to say, hey, everyone slow down now to 40 miles an hour. And now, you know, we can get, again, more surface transportation wise, we can now get more efficiencies throughout the roadway network because we can control that 10% of the vehicles. I think that to me is an interesting a way that we're going to see transportation change. I also see that, look, and we all know this, the autonomy now turns that commute into now another room of your house. I mean, traveling now is not traveling. The excitement to get from point A to point B is no longer, the, hey, look what's going on. Is my head down looking at a movie? Am I reading something? Am I looking at social media versus what's happening around me? I think that's going to change how we do. Look, we have billboards up all over the place. Does that change now? That I think is going to change our landscape as well. And you have the picture up on how we're doing electrification. I appreciate you bringing that up. One of the things that STV developed in their Pure model is talking with transit agencies of how do we electrify your fleet, specifically of what's the need that you have, how do we electrify that need, because right now it's and how you do the charging. So yeah, is it that what you saw, that large overhead charging that you're doing, the gantry charging? Are you doing inductive charging? We see it's a combination of the two. Here's the other thing, working with a lot of the different fleets, it is taking a long time. You had this mandate to go electric. We all know that infrastructure wasn't there quite ready for it. The manufacturers aren't there right now. So I think that's one of the biggest problems we have. We're going to wait years to get, I'm going to use buses as a great example. We don't have manufacturers here in the country that can produce those buses. So yes, it's great that all the transit agencies want to change to electric, but who's manufacturing it? And I think that's where, if you really look at a GDP and jobs and manufacturing, that's where you really could see a creation if we want to go to that 50%, because right now we don't have it within the country itself. So I think that's a key thing. And again, it goes back to the data, Andres, if you tie in, data to all this is, I should be able to know how great is it that, yep, your Tesla or any other EV is telling you, yep, I have X amount of charge left. And by the way, within that 50-mile radius, here's everything else that could happen there. I could buy food. I could do this. I could order this, order that. I think I see transportation is our living room now. That's what it's going to be in the next, the next few years, that it is just an extension of your living room. And I think that's the fundamental change.
I'd like to ask you, Dan, what's the state of inductive charging? Because I think a lot of electrification depends on inductive charging.
Yeah.
This sticking a wire in is it's tedious.
I think, Llewellyn, great question. From what we're seeing is, I think over the last 3 years, it's really the propensity for using it has increased tremendously. The cost, the biggest thing is cost, because now you've got to put something into the pavement, and we know if you put once you start installing something in the pavement, operations and maintenance is going to be your biggest thing. But on the use cases that we had, whether it's fast moving vehicles charging or the buses, which I love doing, whether it's a bus, a garbage truck, a fire engine, that you could have that inductive charging at corners. It is coming. I think it's advancing more, and I think we're going to see a lot more. In fact, we have been recommending it on a lot of our projects where the case works. So I see that as a key element, more on slower vehicles, again, transit versus over the road trucking. I know Michigan's been testing theirs out right now. But I think we start small with that inner city side, and then I think we could expand out. But I think there's some really good companies that are doing work with it right now.
Does your study that extend to ambulances? It would seem to me that ambulances are due for an upgrade. There really hasn't been much advance. They're primarily vans that are converted to the purpose. They used to be specifically built ambulances, and now they tend to be conversions rather than built from the ground up. Rather like limousines have become stretched saloons rather than built from the ground up, as it were.
Here's the interesting thing on electrification, and especially with emergency service providers, it's so dynamic of where they go and what they do. We haven't seen the market yet for something on the electric side. I do see it on other propulsions. Again, you are an ambulance. Look, how many times are you going to run to a site, pick up an injured person and have to get them back to a hospital. Hospital is absolutely great location. As again, I go back to freight in the same way. Is you're stopping off at a dock or at an emergency center. Great time for you to stop and get a charge. Yep, absolutely. Love
If I
it.
could be spared a moment of time here for a personal story, a couple of months ago, I was in Paris and I fell and injured my head, and I had to be ambulanced to the trauma center. But what happens is basically the trauma center comes to you. It's a very well-equipped vehicle. It has a staff of 4, often one of them is a doctor. So by the time you get to the hospital or the trauma center, all the prep work is done. Of course, they don't ask you for your insurance because they don't need to, but that's a different story. And I thought that was very efficient in a way. A lot and life-saving, because if you can get, whatever it is in an emergency done on the spot, you're obviously better than somebody in an ambulance with a siren screaming in traffic.
You're describing why edge compute will dominate over time, because going to the central hub takes time and is inefficient, and the service should come to you. In Dubai, for example, if you run out of fuel or if you have a problem, if you need to charge your EV, there are no gas stations. The gas station comes to you. The EV charger comes to you.
That's true. And of course, a lot of this service is restricted in the US by regulation, safety regulation. In Vietnam, every other house is a gas station with a Clorox bottle full of gasoline on the sidewalk, and you just pull over and they fuel you and you pay for it. You couldn't do that in this country, of course. There would be uproar.
Sure.
And even in Vietnam, now they do it in the house and they put a brick outside, which indicates that it's a sub rosa gas station. I'm interested in other ways of moving freight. We haven't mentioned, Dan, moving it through the air, drones, and yet all the big companies that generate a lot of freight, particularly retail freight, Amazon comes to mind, are looking at drones and drone delivery. Is that part of your portfolio?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at what's happening in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I mean, look, you've got drone deliveries from Walmart right now that are happening. I think for us, the biggest thing to look for is how do you create those hubs that you can have those simple, I'm gonna call it flight patterns. I mean, as a pilot of the one, this is the biggest thing is that airspace and how quickly you can utilize that airspace and how you can convert, especially large tenements or large condo complexes in cities. They could have that drone drop off right on the roof. I think that's a key element there. I did want to touch upon just one thing as we were talking about autonomy and bringing services to people. One of the things that we are working on a concept of one of the universities is being able to bring medical to areas that are whether it's rural, whether it's areas in urban areas that don't have the facilities, that instead of calling up 911 and have that ambulance come to you, like you were talking about, Llewellyn, is how do we bring medical services to those folks? How do we bring that autonomy that is that walk-in autonomous clinic that you can get that quick diagnosis, whether it's to a quote unquote WebMD or there's some simple diagnostics that can be done to get people preventative health care. I think that is something that we've talked about, where you have multiple connected vehicles that are autonomous that can say, hey, yep, today we're going to part X of the city, and we're going to do some basic diagnostics, or there's going to be some X-ray. And I think being able to bring that out to the masses is something that's, you talk about transportation. I think that's a new key of bringing things out. So I think that is something that we're working on that I think Andres would be really good, again, in a rural setting as well as in an urban setting.
And AI is going to speed that along tremendously. I think the great advance with AI is going to be in medicine. It may not be the blessing that we hope it is in other things, but it will be in medicine, medical research, and the delivery of medicine, or the delivery of expertise in medicine.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I think the great advance with AI is going to be in medicine. It may not be the blessing that we hope it is in other things, but it will be in medicine, medical research, and the delivery of medicine, or the delivery of expertise in medicine.
Sure,
I agree
sure,
with you on that.
absolutely, Johnny.
Well, you know, I'm hearing you guys talk about all of this technology. We're flying around like bumblebees. The hospital is coming to you like wasp. And I'm sitting there drinking my mint julep while people are servicing me. And I want to ask my distinguished guests this question. What kind of jobs are you creating? How do you see the transformation of how people go through the day with this new technology? With the drone delivery, for example, when we have to have things associated with the drones to get them from point A to point B, do we have to pick up the teaching of the relationship between delivery, right, in our schools, right? How do you see the job creation and wealth creation, I might add,
Yep.
evolving in your industry in the next 50 years?
No, it's a great question. I appreciate that, John. And I think it start off with the basic. I think it comes to servicing, maintenance, and servicing of where these vehicles, whether it's automated vehicles, whether it's drones, you're now going to create a new service that you're going to have, and working with various companies that are looking to, as an autonomous car taxi, robo-taxi, let's just call it that for a second. That's got to be clean. That's got to be sanitized. That's got to make sure if it's not an EV that the engine is serviced. I think that's going to create an industry. I think being able to be that mechanic on the fly is going to be an industry where now, if you think about a Lyft driver, you're going to have the Lyft Uber model for mechanics. For all this, because drones flying from X to Y, let's use that Walmart, take that drone breaks down in my backyard. Who's going to fix it? As long as it doesn't do any damage, who's going to come and fix it? So I think you're going to have a lot of that on-demand service that we don't have right now, where before it was brick and mortar, where now it's going to be more people having that opportunity to work, not that 9 to 5 job, but those off hours to supplement income. I think that's going to be part of that creation. And for me personally, I think that we need to have more people in the services industry, meaning I'll call them the trades. And I think that's where I think we're going to see a very big influx, because, you look at AI doing a lot of work. There's still that menial, there's still that labor that has to be done. And I think we're missing that right now. I think that's a country where we can grow a lot more.
So Dan,
Absolutely.
as a follow-up, Dan, I'm wondering how much XR or AR is being used for that training, or
A
where
lot.
do you see that playing a role?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, you're doing medical training right now on surgeries. So doing the mechanical fixing, absolutely see that right now happening, and just that rolling out even further as time moves on, because again, that's training that could be done virtually. That can be done. Again, you don't have to go to a technical school. It could be a spinoff of a technical school to do that as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
Good, because we like to think about not only how jobs will be created, but how new wealth will be created, so other jobs can be created in the future.
Absolutely.
So I think this is a very important part of your industry, and I think as we get locked into the Jetsons of the Jetsons of
Yeah.
today, then we ask the people questions about how will they live and work, where will they live. Will I be able to drone to the countryside myself instead of living in the city? Will I fly around like a bumblebee myself? What did this do for grocery shopping? What did it do for the education of kids? Where would the schools be? What did it do for all of those things that have made us a great country? So I think that you're in a very, very center of change. And in America, it's always been about mobility from the covered
Yeah.
wagons.
Dan, tell us real quick what's happening to you and your team and your focus the next 6 months. What's ahead of you? What events? What activities? Anything that you can share?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think for us and for the company, there's a few things. I think Olympic Games in LA are a big push for us to make sure that we could help and support those. I think for us as a country in 4 years to really show the world what we have done, not only as a society, technology-wise, but as a society to move people, move goods, and security is going to be one of the biggest things for us. I also see as we move forward, advancing those different those areas of electric small modular reactors, as well as as a hydrogen to help support both mobility and safety throughout our transportation.
Got it. Got it. Gentlemen, final thoughts, Llewellyn?
think it's interesting. I think everything is going to be different, not in 50 years, but in 10 years. It's coming much faster than we anticipate. I do agree very much with Dan that we're going to need really sophisticated repair people. We've got to destigmatize that sort of work my father did, destigmatizing, because that is the one thing that's going to be reliable in the future. If you can fix things, you'll have a job. Otherwise, it may be being done by a computer. But remember, there's always the human touch. We don't have to have Johnny play his guitar. We could put a record on, but we love Johnny.
Johnny, final thoughts, take us away.
That's the first thing Llewellyn has said kind about me since the program. And I'm very, very appreciative that he realizes my great talent. No, seriously, I think it's, look, as we study these things, and I've been studying technology and society for years, it's all based around mobility. I mean, you go back to University of Chicago, everybody was sort of around the city, of what we call the triangle of the industry. And then we had one of the greatest impact, of course, the technology was the highways, the expressways that we took from Germany after World War II, that allowed the suburbanization of America.
And Johnny, the canals which made the Industrial Revolution happen.
Absolutely, and the canals that made it happen. So what he's going to realize is that he's in a long tradition of mobility, and we're going to see down what your generation can do moving forward in the great country, and also contribution to other countries also. Yeah.
Take us away, Johnny.
But in all this mobility is still moving to me. And I swim like a fish in the sea all the time. But that's what it takes for me to be here. I don't mind. Still is still moving to me. Still is still moving to me. But I don't know how it feels. I can't put it in words, but I know that it's real. I can't be moving or I can't be still. Still is still moving to me. Still is still moving to me.
Woo! Thank you, Dan. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time today.
Take care.
Absolutely. All the best.
Take care.
Okay,
All.
everybody stay safe. Have a good, okay.